Many African governments and media houses still rely on Western news agencies like Reuters, AFP, and AP for news distribution and verification. This reliance means that most African news stories pass through a Western editorial filter before they reach global audiences. And as you can imagine, this process often distorts the narrative. Hello and welcome to One Africa Show, where we delve into the conversations that shape the future of Africa. I'm your host, Patrick Newman, and today we continue our exciting series, A Seat at the Table, Africa's Struggle for Representation. This series is all about amplifying Africa's voice on the global stage, shining a light on the struggles, the triumphs, and the path to true representation. But before we jump into today's critical topic, I'd like to remind you to subscribe, like, and share this video with your network. By supporting this series, you're helping us push the conversation forward and ensuring that these important discussions reach a wider audience. Also, stay tuned for our upcoming book, A Seat at the Table, Africa's Struggle for Representation, where we expand on everything we're covering here. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Today we continue with Chapter 5, Media Representation, Who Tells Africa's Story? For decades, the narrative surrounding Africa has been overwhelmingly shaped by Western media outlets like CNN, BBC, the New York Times, and Reuters. These media giants often dictate how Africa is perceived around the world, highlighting stories of poverty, war, disease, and corruption, while underreporting stories of progress, resilience, and innovation. This portrayal has created harmful stereotypes of Africa as a continent defined only by struggle, ignoring the dynamic and diverse realities of African nations. So why has Western media held such dominance in telling Africa's story? To answer this, we need to understand the historical context. During the colonial era, Western media outlets were used as tools to justify imperialist interventions, portraying Africa as uncivilized and in need of European guidance. As time passed, that narrative evolved but remained entrenched in the perception of Africa as a land of dependency rather than a place of self-sufficiency. Fast forward to today, and foreign correspondents often report from major cities like Nairobi, Johannesburg, and Dakar, cities that are hubs of culture, politics, and economic activity in Africa. Yet these correspondents frequently cover African affairs without a full understanding of the local cultural, political, and economic complexities. The reports are often framed through a Western lens, which perpetuates the outsider's perspective rather than providing an authentic African voice. In addition, many African governments and media houses still rely on Western news agencies like Reuters, AFP, and AP for news distribution and verification. This reliance means that most African news stories pass through a Western editorial filter before they reach global audiences. And as you can imagine, this process often distorts the narrative, omitting African voices and perspectives in favor of framing that appeals to international readers, further reinforcing the skewed perception of Africa. But the impact of this negative portrayal goes far beyond just the media landscape. It has tangible consequences on how Africa is perceived worldwide, shaping everything from global perceptions to international policy and even investment decisions. Let's talk about the economic consequences first. When Africa is continually depicted as a continent of crisis and despair, it discourages foreign investment. Investors might hesitate to engage with African markets, fearing instability, corruption, or violence. Even countries like Rwanda and Ethiopia, which have made significant strides in economic growth, often struggle to change the perception that they are part of a wider narrative of poverty and instability. The political and diplomatic consequences are also deeply felt. Global policymakers often rely on media reports to shape their understanding of Africa. Unfortunately, biased reporting can lead to paternalistic international policies that treat African nations as perpetual aid recipients rather than as equal partners. This affects the kinds of foreign aid programs that are prioritized. Too often, they focus on humanitarian assistance instead of fostering sustainable development and empowering local solutions. Africa ends up being seen as a charity case rather than a region with dynamic economies and innovative leadership. On a cultural and social level, the relentless portrayal of Africa as a land of suffering and chaos affects how Africans, especially young people, view themselves and their future. Constant exposure to negative images can lead to feelings of inferiority and can make young Africans feel disconnected from the promise of their own continent's potential. What's even more troubling is that African diasporic communities often find themselves countering these stereotypes when engaging with non-Africans, who are typically only exposed to skewed or one-dimensional representations of the continent. But despite this overwhelming influence of Western media, there is a new generation of African journalists, filmmakers, and content creators who are reclaiming Africa's narrative. Through African-owned media platforms and digital storytelling, Africans are taking control of how their stories are told, presenting a more authentic, diverse, and holistic view of the continent. There are several African media outlets leading the charge in this shift. For instance, Africa News is a pan-African news network offering stories from an African perspective, while New African Magazine highlights African innovation, politics, and culture. Nation Media Group, based in Kenya, is one of the largest independent media organizations in Africa, producing credible and diverse content. Then there's Mail and Guardian Africa, which is dedicated to investigative journalism on key African issues. But perhaps the biggest transformation has been the rise of digital storytelling and the influence of social media. Platforms like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok have given Africans the tools to share their stories directly, bypassing traditional media gatekeepers. African content creators and digital influencers are using these platforms to challenge the mainstream narratives and present Africa in a more balanced light. Hashtags like Osh Africa Rising, Osh the Africa, They Never Show You, and This is Africa have gained global traction, showcasing African achievements in technology, business, fashion, art, and so much more. So how can Africans continue to reclaim the continent's narrative? Here are some strategies for moving forward. 1. Investing in independent African media. African governments, businesses, and civil society need to support independent media outlets that prioritize African perspectives. This could involve funding investigative journalism, training local reporters, and ensuring press freedom so African stories are told with integrity and accuracy. 2. Strengthening regional media collaboration. African media outlets should work together across borders to share resources, expertise, and coverage. Regional partnerships can create a stronger, more unified voice that counters external distortions and showcases the diversity and richness of African life. 3. Encouraging diaspora media engagement. The African diaspora plays a crucial role in reshaping global perceptions of Africa. By supporting diaspora-led media initiatives, Africans abroad can counter misinformation and provide alternative narratives that reflect the complexity and vibrancy of the continent. 4. Producing high-quality African films and documentaries. The African film industry has immense potential to reshape global narratives. Platforms like Nollywood, South Africa's vibrant film industry, and new film hubs in Ghana and Kenya must focus on producing high-quality films that go beyond the common tropes of suffering and instead highlight diverse African experiences. These films should be showcased at international film festivals and on streaming platforms to reach global audiences. 5. Leveraging technology and AI for content creation. Advancements in AI and digital media open up new possibilities for African content creators. Tools like AI-powered news aggregation, virtual reality, VR, storytelling, and blockchain for media authenticity can revolutionize how African stories are told and shared across the globe. In conclusion, the question of who tells Africa's story is at the heart of shaping how the continent is perceived in the world. For too long, the narrative has been controlled by external voices that focus on Africa's struggles while overlooking its triumphs. But the rise of African-owned media platforms, digital storytelling, and African film is shifting that dynamic. By investing in independent journalism, strengthening regional cooperation, supporting diaspora media, and producing high-quality content, Africa can reclaim its narrative and ensure that its stories are told with authenticity and dignity. Thank you for joining me today on One Africa Show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and stay tuned for our upcoming book, A Seat at the Table, Africa's Struggle for Representation. Together, we can ensure that Africa's voice is heard loud and clear across the globe.